In 1986, an American soldier named Collins was patrolling the coast of Vietnam, inspecting cargo ships to ensure no enemies were sneaking aboard. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice call out, "Hey, Collins!" Collins could hardly believe his eyes. His childhood friend Chickie was standing right behind him. "What are you doing here? This is Vietnam," Collins exclaimed. Chickie smiled and said, "I'm here to deliver beer." Yes, he was really there to deliver beer. A draft-dodging New York street kid had traveled all the way to Vietnam to bring beer to his old buddy. This is a true story. But why did he do it, and what was the final outcome? Let's go back 2 months earlier to a bar in uptown New York. Chickie was already on his way to being completely hammered. Suddenly, the bartender challenged him. "If you're so tough, why not go to Vietnam? The guys are all over there." In truth, Chickie had just finished his service in Japan and had recently returned home, so he didn't have to go to Vietnam. But who talks rationally after a few drinks? Chickie, filled with bravado, replied, "Who says I won't go? I can do that."
I could do that.
"Not only will I go, but I'll also bring some of tonight's fine liquor to my brothers over there. Good old hometown booze." The whole bar cheered at his declaration. Riding the wave of excitement, Chickie added, "Give me a list of names and I'll visit each one of them, delivering beer personally." Then after a big gulp of whiskey, Chickie blacked out. The next day, Chickie woke up with a hazy memory of the previous night. He remembered bits and pieces, but nothing concrete. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Chickie quickly answered, and there stood his best friend's mom, holding a letter. He was puzzled, wondering what this was all about. As Chickie started to piece together last night's events with her hints, several more moms showed up, each holding a letter. They all pleaded with Chickie to deliver these letters to their sons in Vietnam, along with the beer. As the saying goes, in war, family letters are worth their weight in gold. Overnight, Chickie had become a hero in his community. So he decided to go for it. Vietnam it was. Was he really scared? Not at all. Using his experience as a reserve quartermaster, Chickie quickly found a ship heading to Vietnam and got a job as a sailor. His plan was to use the few days when the ship was unloading to land in Vietnam, find a few military contacts, and deliver the beer and letters. But as soon as he stepped off the ship, he ran into his childhood friend Collins, one of the guys on his delivery list. After enjoying a beer and hearing Chickie's mission, Collins immediately offered to guide him to the military camp where several of their buddies were stationed. However, when they arrived at the camp, they found out that the unit had been reassigned and the men had been scattered across the front lines. When the officers learned about Chickie's mission, they told him that while they couldn't help with most of the deliveries, they knew that one of the men, Dugan, was stationed in the Northern Combat Zone under their jurisdiction. Conveniently, there was a plane heading there, and they arranged for Chickie to hitch a ride. After flying to the designated area, he still needed to hitch a ride to the frontline trenches. By chance, he flagged down a Jeep, and the driver suddenly hit the brakes and turned to look at him in astonishment. "Is that you, Kevin?" It was incredible. Kevin and Chickie were neighbors back home. Out of 500,000 American troops in Vietnam, what were the odds? So, Kevin took Chickie to find Dugan, and the three friends enjoyed a hearty drink in the frontline trenches. For a moment, Chickie felt that maybe Vietnam wasn't so bad after all. Where was all this talk of relentless warfare? Little did Chickie know that this evening was the Lunar New Year of 1968. That night, Vietnam launched its largest Tet Offensive since the war began. Chickie, right in the middle of the frontline trenches, found himself caught in the thick of it. The battle raged on all night until dawn, when the gunfire finally subsided. The next day, as the unit had to relocate, Chickie was escorted to the capital, Saigon. Unfortunately, the Tet Offensive had reached Saigon as well. When Chickie arrived at the U.S. Embassy in Saigon, he found himself in the midst of chaos. A sudden explosion rocked the building. At that moment, Chickie truly experienced the terror of war. He ducked for cover, hiding wherever he could. Once the gunfire stopped, he heard a massive explosion to the northeast of the city. A mushroom cloud rose in the distance. Clearly, the munitions depot just outside Saigon had been destroyed, and the next friend Chickie needed to find just happened to be stationed at that very depot. At that moment, Chickie found a burst of bravery. He grabbed the beer and dashed towards the munitions depot outside the city, determined to deliver one last bottle to his friends amidst the chaos of war. By some stroke of luck, as he reached the trenches, he heard a familiar voice call out, "Chickie, is that you?" It was his friend Papas, resting in one of the bunkers. Chickie handed the beer to Papas and explained his mission. Papas looked at him and said, "Let's hope this war ends soon." As the war escalated, Chickie found himself unable to move freely. He was ordered to return home immediately, but he insisted on delivering beer to everyone on his list before he left. Even though the ship that had brought him was long gone, he refused to leave. Eventually, he had no choice but to board a return ship to the U.S. under military orders. On April 1st, 1968, Chickie returned to the bar where his journey had begun. Later, of the 6 brothers he sought on the battlefield, only 1 had been killed, while the other 5 made it home safely. Today, Chickie is still alive and enjoying life with his old friends. His incredible story has been adapted into a movie and featured in numerous grand anti-war narratives. It serves as a powerful testament to the human spirit, but for Chickie, it's simply a true story. He says that if you've seen the real horrors of war, you'd be just as firmly opposed to it as he is.
I was letting these kids die without me helping them, and that's what I wanted to do.